All right, today we're going to talk about DNA. Your title can just simply be DNA in your notebook. If you don't have it, get it out right now. Do me a favor and take a look at these pictures. Tell me, what do they have in common? A lot of people end up telling me that they stand for something else or they're codes, which is correct. Okay, so they're all codes. And why are we talking about codes? DNA is a code. Okay. So DNA is a code. Does anyone remember what DNA codes for or has the instructions for? It has the instructions on how to make proteins, okay? So in our notebook, let's write some of this stuff down, all right? DNA, what does it stand for? It stands for this big word, deoxyribonucleic acid. Write that down. We're going to break down this word, this really big word, deoxyribonucleic acid. You'll notice we see some different parts of words in there, okay? D means not. Oxy, oxygen. Ribo, ribosome. Nucleic refers to nucleus, and then acid, okay? So let's talk about the first part, not oxygen. The reason it says not oxygen is if we look at deoxyribose, this is part of the sugar that makes up DNA, it's missing an oxygen here, deoxy. Normally it looks like this and has an OH, an oxygen and a hydrogen. The sugar that's in DNA is missing that oxygen. Ribosome, ribo, that makes sense because proteins are made in the ribosome. And nucleic or nucleus makes sense because DNA is stored in the nucleus. So we know that DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. Okay? DNA is important because it has the instructions on how to make proteins. So go ahead and write that down. We've oftentimes talked about chocolate chip cookies, right? Making them. So a recipe is similar to DNA because a recipe has the instructions on how to make cookies. DNA has the instructions on how to make proteins. Now, DNA is what we call a double helix, okay? So a double helix, it's like a ladder that's been twisted, okay? So we're going to write down that it's got a double helix shape. And if you want to draw, I have kind of a simplified drawing over here on the right. Then draw a squiggle and another squiggle, and then draw some like ladder rungs in between it. This is the basic structure of DNA. Double because it's got two strands, two strings coming down, one blue and the second blue. Helix because it's twisted. So now that we've talked about this shape, we've got to talk about all the little parts that make up this double helix shape, okay? All right, so just like Legos, you need lots of building blocks, lots of Legos to make like a Lego house or a Lego castle. You need lots of building blocks to make up DNA. So go ahead and write this down. DNA is made of building blocks, and those building blocks are called nucleotides. You might ask, well, what the heck is a nucleotide? Well, a nucleotide is what's found in this blue box here. See how there's lots of them, right? We stack them up together and they make this DNA molecule, okay? You might be thinking, Ms. Finkston, this DNA molecule doesn't look like this twisted ladder we just saw. Well, it will eventually, okay, when it's longer and it gets twisted up. So if we take a look at this picture, there's actually lots of nucleotides. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 nucleotides on this side and 6 on this side. So let's talk about what a nucleotide actually is. Okay, so nucleotides are made up of three things. Make sure you write this down. The first thing is what's called deoxyribose sugar. So I'll tell you anything that ends in OSE is a sugar. And this sugar is a pentagon shape. So we're going to be drawing a nucleotide and labeling the parts. There's going to be three different shapes we're going to draw over here. For now, just draw the pentagon. If you're like, I don't really know how to draw a pentagon, just draw like a house shape. And we can label it, this is the deoxyribose sugar. You're going to have to know what the shapes are for your test, okay? Now, we do simplified pictures, right? Pentagon. Here's what it actually looks like, okay? It's still a pentagon, but see how it's got H's and O's, right? You don't have to write this down, but I'm just showing you it's made up of carbons and hydrogens and oxygens, so we oversimplified things, right? And remember, the reason we call it deoxyribose, it's missing an oxygen here. The second part, okay, a phosphate. Phosphate sounds like phosphorus, right? Which is on the periodic table. We usually draw this as a little circle sticking up from the side. So on your drawing over here on the right, make sure you draw that circle and label it. Well, what does a phosphate actually look like? A phosphate is a phosphorus with 4 oxygens. Okay, you don't need to know that, but I'm just showing you it's not actually a pretty little circle, it's a molecule. The third thing that makes up a nucleotide is what we call a base. Now, a base can be the letter A, the letter T, the letter C, or the letter G. Just like how our Legos can be red or blue or yellow, these bases can be different colors as well. We usually draw the base as a rectangle, so make sure you draw that on your drawing and label it. So now that we've seen all three of these shapes, this is a full nucleotide. Let's look at what it actually looks like, not just all simplified shapes. Here's what it actually looks like, right? So it's all these molecules, and we just simplify it to make it easier. Now, when we talk about these bases, okay, the bases can be A stands for adenine, C stands for cytosine, T for thymine, and G for guanine. So you're going to write these down. Most of the time, we're not going to use the big words for them. We'll just use the abbreviated letters. And you can see those over here. So let's take a look at how these bases, how these letters pair up. So if you take a look at this picture, what letter does A, adenine, always pair with? It pairs with a T, right? So every time we see an A, it always goes with a T. What about C? What letter does C pair up with? C always pairs with G. So every time we have a C, we see it paired with a G. So let's write down these rules. A always pairs with T. C always pairs with G. These rules are going to be really important for you to know later on in this unit. So let's look at how this DNA molecule is set up. We know that there are nucleotides here, right? We just learned that this is a sugar, a phosphate, and a base. Well, the letters in the middle are connected by hydrogen bonds. So go ahead and write that down. You might be wondering, what the heck's a hydrogen bond? Well, it's a bond made out of hydrogen. So it's two hydrogen molecules connected together. Okay. This is going to be very important when we talk about how DNA copies itself. Okay, but for now, just know that the letters are connected by hydrogen bonds. A bond is just a connecting point. So let's take a look, right? What letters would match with each? A would go with what letter? T, right? T with A. G with C. C with G. So notice our C's and G's always match and our A's and T's always match. So just like letters spell out words, right? HOLSCO spells school, okay? DNA letters, the base letters, A's, T's, C's, and G's, code for traits. So whether you have blue eyes or brown eyes or any of those variety of things. Now, we've simplified this a ton, okay? Here's an example of somebody's DNA code. You have this inside of each one of your cells. So all these A's, T's, C's, and G's, okay? Each person has 3 billion letters in each cell. That's a lot, okay? So 3 billion letters, and the order of those letters and which letters you have, those are going to make up your traits. Those are what code for the proteins. All right, let's take a look at this picture. What percentage of genes do you share with other organisms? A chimp, you share 98% of your letters with a chimp, okay? A cat, 90%, a cow, 80%, a chicken, 60%, okay? A mouse, 80%, a fish, 71%. You might be asking, well, why the heck do I have letters in common with these organisms? Why do I have these DNA letters that are the same? I'm not a cow. So this is something you're going to need to know. So write this down. Why do organisms have so much DNA in common? Well, there's a couple reasons. First of all organisms are made of cells. So because all organisms are made of cells, all organisms have to have DNA that codes for all the parts of those cells. So we talked about like the cell membrane and the nucleus and the ribosomes, okay? DNA codes for all those things, okay? DNA has the instructions on how to make all of those. So because all organisms are made out of cells, they've got to have all the same letters that are going to code for those cells. Second reason, all cells divide. So every single cell has to have DNA that's going to tell it how to divide, that has the instructions on how to divide, okay? And the third reason, all cells need to make nutrients, right? They need to be able to process sugar and convert it to energy. So they've got to have DNA that codes for how to do that. So these are our 3 reasons. All organisms are made of cells, all cells divide, and all cells need to make nutrients.